Why did the air at Fort feel heavier than Afghanistan's deserts? Staff Sergeant stepped off the transport with her duffel bag slung over her right shoulder, never her left. That side wasn't the same anymore. Titanium plates and stitched nerve pathways carried what used to be bone and muscle, and though the bag weighed the same as it always had, it pressed down differently now. Heavier, not in pounds, in memory. The North Carolina humidity hit her like a wall. She tugged at the cuff of her long-sleeved uniform, though the heat pressed sweat instantly across her back. Soldiers nearby stripped down, rolling sleeves, letting the sticky air cling to them. But no, long sleeves stayed. They were her armor, not the kind issued by the quartermaster, the kind that hid the truth. The base buzzed with controlled chaos, morning PT groups jogging in formation, drill sergeants barking, armored vehicles rumbling on distant asphalt. It should have felt like homecoming. Instead, felt like a fraud, a ghost wearing a uniform she wasn't sure she had earned anymore. 3 months of medical leave, a stack of papers that said fit for duty, therapy sessions where she had nodded, smiled, insisted she was ready. But deep inside, one voice still whispered, "You're broken goods, they'll see it sooner or later." A private with a clipboard flagged her down. Barely out of basic, face still carrying the energy of someone who hadn't yet seen a battlefield. "Welcome to Fort, Sergeant," he chirped. "Housing assignment here, orientation packet 2. She took the manila envelope with her right hand, always the right, always automatic. The young soldier didn't notice. Why would he? To him, she looked like any other NCO returning from leave. But the truth was buried beneath her sleeves, a story written in surgical steel, skin grafts and burned scars. Her orders were simple: report to Colonel Harrison at 1400 hours. They called him Iron Mike, a nickname meant to inspire respect or fear. The private leaned in, whispering like it was forbidden knowledge. "He's old school, runs a tight ship." Gave a curt nod. She served under hard men before. Some respected competence. Some respected nothing at all. Either way, weakness was never tolerated, and weakness was the word that stalked her now like a shadow. Her hand brushed the rebuilt shoulder as she walked away. Titanium plates under skin. Pain wrapped around nerves that misfired without warning. She adjusted her bag, eyes straight, pace steady. The army didn't stop for damaged goods. Fort was larger than her last post. Modern, gleaming facilities. Soldiers marched with a precision that was almost intimidating, their bearing sharp. She watched a unit doing synchronized push-ups on the field, their cadence echoing with power. And for a flicker of a second, she remembered what it felt like to be one of them. Admired, unstoppable, first to volunteer, first to climb, first to carry the extra load. But now, she wasn't sure if she could even keep up. Her barracks room was clean, impersonal. A narrow bed, a desk, a closet she unpacked in silence, each item folded with ritual precision. The routine was comfort, order, control. Her ribbons caught a stray beam of sunlight through the window, all but one. The Purple Heart sat at the bottom of her bag, wrapped like a secret she couldn't bear to look at. She shoved it back down. A piece of paper in her personnel folder weighed more than the metal anyway. Limited duty profile. Bureaucratic words that reduced blood and fire into neat restrictions. No overhead lifting. No rope climbs. No extended exertion. To the army, that was who she was now, not the Bronze Star, not the Kandahar convoy, just a soldier with limits. Her laptop pinged. An email from Colonel Sarah Martinez, her old commander, the one who had fought tooth and nail to keep her from medical discharge. "You're one of the finest soldiers I've ever served with. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The words gave her pause, they gave her hope, but not silence. Not silence to the doubt chewing inside her. A knock at the door broke the spiral. "Sergeant." Opened to find Corporal Jackson. Compact frame, clear, intelligent eyes, confidence radiating. "Just checking in," Jackson said with a warm smile. "The squad's excited to have you. Word is, you've got some serious combat experience." gave a careful reply. Reputation preceded her often, some. The truth was darker. The survivor of Kandahar, the one who pulled 3 soldiers from a burning vehicle while another bled out in her arms. Stories were told in bars and barracks. They never included the nerve damage, the sleepless nights, the shoulder that turned numb without warning. Jackson gave a parting nod. Colonel Harrison runs morning PT, 5:30 sharp. He's tough on soldiers who can't keep up. Fair warning. Smiled tightly. I'll be ready. But when the door shut, she leaned against it. Ready? It felt like a lie, a necessary lie. Tomorrow would be her first test, and failure wasn't an option. The alarm screamed at 500, but had already been awake, staring at the ceiling. Her shoulder throbbed like fire beneath her skin. She moved carefully, dressing in her PT uniform, boots laced with hands that trembled only slightly. In the mirror, she looked like every other soldier. Normal. Functional. The scars stayed hidden beneath long sleeves, the favoring of her right side masked by posture and pride. Outside, the base sat in gray half-light. Autumn air carried a bite. Breath hung in the air as soldiers gathered, chatter nervous, anticipation sharp. Word spread. Colonel Harrison himself would run PT, rare, serious. Joined the flow toward the field. Hundreds of soldiers assembled, lined in formation. And then he appeared. Iron Mike Harrison, built like a linebacker, hair clipped short, uniform pressed with a precision that cut the eye. His stare swept the field like a blade, a predator measuring prey. Good morning, warriors. His voice carried without a microphone, trained by years of command. I trust you all slept well, because your rest period is over. Nervous chuckles rippled through the ranks. His stomach twisted. I've reviewed this base's fitness scores, Harrison barked, packing. I'm not impressed. We claim to be the finest fighting force in the world. Numbers say otherwise, effective immediately, surprise fitness evaluations. No excuses, no advance warning. Today, we separate warriors from wannabes. A silence fell across the formation. His pulse hammered. Her profile allowed modified PT, but Harrison's words cut through her resolve like glass. No excuses, no medical profiles unless you're missing a limb. Her chest tightened. She thought of speaking up, to explain, to show the paper signed by surgeons, but the colonel's stride, the fire in his eyes, told her, not today. They would run 2 miles, push-ups, sit-ups, rope climb, obstacle course, load carries, a gauntlet designed to strip the weak from the strong. Her stomach sank at one word, rope. Her left shoulder couldn't do it, no matter how much she wanted to, no matter how much she pretended. Rope climbs were impossible. The colonel's gaze swept over the NCOs and landed squarely on her. She felt his stare, heavy, accusing, even though he hadn't spoken her name. The formation began to disperse toward the start line. And in that moment made a decision, a dangerous one, a desperate one. She stepped forward, heart pounding. Sir, permission to speak. Harrison turned, pale blue eyes narrowed. Make it quick, Sergeant, we're on the clock. Swallowed. Sir, I have medical restrictions. I need modified parameters. For 1 second, silence. Then a laugh. Sharp, cruel, mocking. Medical restrictions, Harrison's voice carried across the field. Are you serious right now, Sergeant? Let me guess. Bad back, trick knee, or maybe some anxiety about getting your uniform dirty. Snickers spread through the ranks. Soldiers shifted, eyes cutting toward her. Heat flooded his face. Her throat burned. Sir, I have legitimate documentation. Save it, Harrison cut her off. I've heard every excuse in the book. What's next? A note from your mommy saying you're too delicate for army training. Laughter erupted, rippling through 200 soldiers like wildfire. Stood frozen, breathing sharp, shoulders rigid, the Purple Heart in her barracks, the Bronze Star citation, the 8 surgeries, none of it mattered now. To them she was a joke. Harrison leaned closer, voice booming. The enemy doesn't care about your medical profile, Sergeant. Bullets don't check your paperwork before they fly. If you can't keep up, maybe you should consider another career." The words dug deeper than any shrapnel ever had. Her reputation, her pride, her place in this new unit, all of it crumbling in the open air. The colonel turned to the formation. "Fall out for the 2-mile run. Let's see who the real soldiers are." And as the soldiers moved, stood motionless for one aching heartbeat longer. Shame and fury tangled in her chest. She knew the risks. She knew what her body could and couldn't do. But in that moment, one truth overpowered the pain. Being seen as weak felt worse than any injury. And so, against every doctor's warning, every surgeon's note, every whispered doubt in her own head, she decided to attempt the full PT test. Why did every step feel like a countdown? The 2-mile run began under a sky painted gray, the autumn air cool, sharp, almost merciful, fell into stride with the middle of the pack. Her legs still carried her well enough. Cardiovascular endurance hadn't abandoned her, not yet. Soldiers breathed in rhythm around her, boots slapping pavement, cadence calls echoing in staggered bursts. But with every step her shoulder pulsed, a throb that grew sharper the longer she ran. By half a mile it was pain. By the first mile it was fire. By the second, her left arm had gone partially numb, dangling at her side as she pressed it against her ribs to control the shock. Still she crossed the finish line respectably, not first, not last, but present, standing. Colonel Harrison's eyes found her instantly. They lingered not with pride, not with acknowledgement, but with suspicion. He smirked. "Interesting running form, Sergeant. Very creative." The words cut deeper than the ache in her chest, but locked her jaw, refusing to react. Push-ups were next. She adjusted her body, engaging her core, shifting extra weight to her right arm. Each repetition sparked fire through her damaged shoulder, but she completed the minimum required. Sit-ups came easier, abdominal strength untouched by the blast. She even exceeded the standard, drawing nods from soldiers nearby. For a fleeting moment, she felt almost invisible again, almost normal. Then the rope loomed. 30 feet of coarse manila hung from the tower, swaying lightly in the breeze like a living thing waiting to devour her. Stared up at it, her pulse hammering so hard it drowned out the chatter around her. Soldiers attacked it one by one. Some scrambled effortlessly to the top. Others strained, slipped, slid down in defeat. Grunts, cheers, and laughter filled the field. Then her name cracked across the air. Harrison's voice carried like a whip. "You're up." Her boots felt heavy as she walked forward. She knew this moment would come. She knew she couldn't win it. But still, she gripped the rope. The fibers burned into her palms as she pulled. Legs clamped, arms strained. 10 feet, then 12. Her legs drove her upward while she tried to spare her left shoulder from bearing full weight. Soldiers below began to cheer. Some even clapped. For a moment, a small, dangerous moment, she believed she might make it. Then the switch flipped. Her shoulder failed. No warning, no slow fade. Just gone. The nerves cut out, strength vanished, and her left arm went dead as if the limb belonged to someone else. Her right hand slipped, rope fibers tearing skin. Time slowed. Her body twisted, weightless for one impossible second before gravity claimed her. The impact rattled through her bones as she hit the dirt hard on her left side. Air exploded from her lungs. Her vision blurred. Pain screamed through her rebuilt shoulder, radiating like electricity. And then silence. 200 soldiers froze, watching, staring, their sergeant sprawled in the dirt like a broken doll. She coughed, tasted blood, bit her tongue in the fall. Tears blurred her eyes. She tried to rise, tried to gather herself. Her left arm hung useless, limp, mocking. Boots appeared in her vision, polished, reflecting sunlight. "Get up, Sergeant," Harrison's voice, cold, public, ruthless. She staggered to her feet, shoulders trembling, arm dangling at her side like dead weight. Around her, whispers spread through the formation like fire. What kind of NCO can't climb a rope? She must faked her way through. Broken. Harrison's voice cut the murmurs apart like artillery. This, he barked, pointing at her, is exactly the kind of weakness that gets soldiers killed. Each word landed like a blow, harder than the fall, harder than the shrapnel. In combat there are no second chances, no participation trophies, no excuses. He paced in front of her like a prosecutor before a jury. You want to know what happens when soldiers like you deploy? Real warriors pick up the slack. They carry the weight. They take the risks, because they can't count on the weak link. Her chest caved under the weight of his words. The faces of Kandahar flickered in her mind. Corporal Martinez dragging himself on a broken leg, Johnson unconscious in her arms, Williams screaming for his mother, dying as she tried to hold back the blood. And she wondered if Harrison would laugh at them too. The colonel leaned closer, lowered his voice just enough but still loud enough for all to hear. Maybe you should think about a desk job, Sergeant, or maybe another line of work altogether. Humiliation burned hotter than pain. Around her, soldiers stayed silent. 200 pairs of eyes, not a word of defense, not a sound of solidarity, just silence. She wanted to vanish, to disappear, to hide where their stares couldn't reach, but instead she stood at attention, broken posture betraying her despite every ounce of willpower. The formation shifted uncomfortably, sensing the cruelty but unwilling to intervene. No one challenged Iron Mike. Finally Harrison snapped, "Fall out, training continues, let's not waste more time." Soldiers moved, slowly, carefully, avoiding her eyes as they passed. She stayed where she was, alone in the dirt. That night sat on her narrow bed, shoulder swollen to twice its size. Ice packs from the clinic pressed to her skin, a bottle of ibuprofen beside her. Her laptop screen glowed with an unfinished email to the personnel office, request for immediate transfer. Her fingers hovered, typed, deleted, typed again. Every keystroke felt like surrender. Beside her bed, the Purple Heart lay in its box, its ribbon stark against the drab room, evidence of another life. A soldier who had once been unbreakable, now mocked, diminished, destroyed in front of her peers. Her phone buzzed. Corporal Jackson's name lit the screen. "You okay, Sergeant?" Followed by another, "Heard what happened. We've got your back." More messages followed. Concern, pity. It all sounded the same. She didn't respond. Instead, she pulled open the drawer. Inside, her discharge papers. Signed, stamped, final. One step away from leaving it all behind, from ending the fight. She stared at them for a long time, long enough for tears to blur the words. Two choices, leave or fight. And in that silent room, she made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow she would face Harrison again, not to apologize, not to beg, not to hide, but to show him exactly what weakness looked like when it saved lives. Why was the air sharper that morning? Felt it before she even reached the field. Soldiers' conversations stopped when she passed. Eyes followed. Some judged. Some simply waited, curious, expectant. Word had traveled fast. Is the one who fell, the one who failed. Her uniform felt heavier today, not from the fabric, from what it hid. 5:30 hours, formation again. A sea of soldiers stretched across the asphalt, boots aligned, shoulders squared, silence like a storm waiting to break. She took her place, left arm aching, shoulder stiff, swollen, pulsing with every breath. She had barely slept, but her decision had already been made in the sleepless dark. Today, the truth came out. The command building doors opened, and there he was. Colonel Harrison, Iron Mike, same crisp uniform, same predator's stare, same voice booming across the morning air. "Good morning, warriors." The chorus of echoed back, but the sound was thinner than yesterday, strained. Harrison's eyes swept the formation, found her instantly, locked on, like a hawk circling prey. Before we begin training, he barked, packing, I want to address something that happened yesterday. Stomach clenched. Some of you witnessed a failure of standards, a breakdown in discipline, a soldier unable to meet expectations. Silence deepened, soldiers stiffened, every eye slid toward her. Sergeant Harrison called, front and center. Her boots echoed as she stepped forward, 3 paces from him, snapped to attention, bearing perfect, shoulders screaming in protest. 200 soldiers held their breath. Yesterday, Harrison began, you demonstrated a concerning inability to meet the most basic requirements. Today, I'm giving you the chance to explain yourself. Why should these soldiers have confidence in your leadership when you can't even climb a rope? The words hung like a noose. Something in shifted, a quiet click, fear burned away. Who, sir? The single word cut through his speech like a bullet. Harrison froze, his eyebrows rose, his mouth hung open for a fraction of a second. Had she just interrupted him? Yes, sir, she said clearly, voice steady, carrying across the field. Because you want to talk about weakness, and I think it's time you understood what that word actually means. The silence became absolute. Even the morning birds seemed to vanish. Harrison's face flushed red. Sergeant, you're out of. But she kept going, steady, calm, loud enough for every soldier to hear. You want to know why I can't climb a rope, Colonel? Why I need medical accommodations? Why you saw what you saw yesterday? His eyes narrowed, fury flickered, but he didn't stop her. Something in her tone, sharp, dangerous, unwavering, held him still. Drew a breath, and then she began to unbutton her jacket. One button, then another, each motion precise, controlled, deliberate. Soldiers whispered, eyes widened. Sergeant, what the hell do you think you're? This, she cut him off, voice like steel, is what weakness looks like after it saves 4 lives. The jacket fell open. Gasps rippled across the field, audible, sharp. Her sleeves rolled back, skin revealed, scars, raised, jagged lines crawling across her arm and shoulder, burn patches, discolored tissue, the outline of titanium plates visible beneath her skin. She turned slightly. Her back caught the morning light. A constellation of shrapnel scars stretched from shoulder blade to ribs. A thick surgical scar carved down her side where muscle had been rebuilt piece by piece. 200 soldiers stared, mouths open, breath caught. Kandahar province. 18 months ago's voice rang out, strong, clear, the tone of someone who had earned the right to speak. Our convoy hit an IED. The blast flipped our vehicle, fire spreading to the fuel tank. Her words fell into silence. No interruptions, no coughs, nothing. I pulled Corporal Martinez out first. Broken leg, couldn't walk. Then Specialist Johnson, head injury, unconscious. Then Private Williams, trapped, screaming for his mother. Her throat tightened, but she didn't stop. I went back for Sergeant. The secondary blast went off while I was dragging him. It threw me 20 feet. Shrapnel tore through my back and shoulder. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Recognition. Some had heard of Kandahar, the nameless soldier who saved lives. Now they knew her face. I spent 6 months in hospitals, 8 surgeries, physical therapy to learn how to use this arm again. I'll never have full sensation, never have full strength, but I came back. Her eyes locked on Harrison, cold, direct. So yes, sir, I need accommodations. I can't climb a rope. I can't lift overhead. But before you humiliate me again, maybe you should ask yourself what kind of leader mocks a Purple Heart recipient without reading her service record. The silence that followed was deafening. Harrison's face drained of color. His jaw tightened. His eyes flickered shock, recognition, shame. Around them, soldiers shifted. Their stares changed. Pity evaporated, replaced by something harder, respect. I didn't ask for special treatment, continued, her voice quieter now but sharper than any shout. I asked for the chance to serve, to use my experience to train the next generation. But if you think that makes me weak, she paused, letting the silence hang, then maybe you need to reconsider what strength really means. She bent down, picked up her jacket, slipped it back on slowly, deliberately, covered the scars, fastened the buttons. But the truth was already out. Every soldier had seen, every soldier now knew. Permission to return to formation, sir. Her voice carried steady. Harrison nodded stiffly, almost mechanical, still processing, still unraveling. She marched back to her spot. 200 pairs of eyes followed her, but now they were different eyes, no longer mocking, no longer doubtful, something else, something heavy, respect. Whispers spread again, but this time the words carried weight, admiration, shock, quiet awe. For the first time since she arrived, felt it, not pity, not suspicion, belonging. The formation dismissed in silence. Soldiers moved slower, quieter, their minds replaying what they had seen. Some glanced at her again, not with judgment but with reverence. And Harrison, he stood alone on the field, his authority cracked, his certainty shattered. His soldiers no longer saw Iron Mike. They saw the man who mocked a hero. And in that silence he called out, "Sergeant, my office, now." Why did his office feel colder than the morning air outside? Followed Harrison through the empty corridors of the command building. The sound of their boots echoed against linoleum, and each step a reminder that 200 soldiers had just witnessed something neither of them could undo. He didn't speak, not once. His broad shoulders were rigid, his stride clipped, faster than normal, as though trying to outrun the silence between them. Soldiers in the hallway stepped aside, their eyes flicking curiously toward her. Everyone had heard. Everyone knew. The story was already spreading like fire through dry brush. When they reached his office, he gestured stiffly. Inside. She entered. The space was immaculate, almost theatrical. Commendations covered the walls. Framed photographs of Harrison with generals, politicians, commanders. Evidence of a decorated career. A desk polished until it reflected the morning light like glass. But behind it, Harrison looked smaller than he had on the field. Sit. His voice was quieter now, stripped of the command presence he wore like armor. Sat, posture perfect, military bearing intact. Her shoulders screamed under the effort, but she refused to shift. For a long moment, he just stared at her. His fingers tapped the folder on his desk, her personnel record, thick with years of service. He hadn't opened it yet, not fully. Finally he spoke. His voice was rough, unsteady. "I owe you an apology." The words fell into the room like stones. He looked down at the folder as if it weighed more than all his commendations combined. "I should read this, all of it. Not just the profile, not just the summary. I saw limited duty and I thought," he stopped, swallowed hard. "I thought weakness." Didn't move, didn't blink. Silence became her weapon. Harrison's hand trembled slightly as he flipped open the folder. His eyes scanned lines of text she already knew by heart. Deployment records, Bronze Star citation, witness statements from Kandahar. His voice cracked as he read aloud. Staff Sergeant displayed extraordinary heroism under fire despite suffering severe injuries from a secondary explosion. She continued to provide medical aid and tactical leadership until evacuation arrived. He set the paper down slowly. His jaw clenched. His pale blue eyes lifted, finally meeting hers. For the first time, they didn't burn with authority. They burned with regret. "4 soldiers are alive today because of what you did," he said, voice low. "4 families, and I," he trailed off, the admission choking him. "I humiliated you in front of your troops. I mocked you. I questioned your right to wear that uniform." The words hung in the air, heavy, unpolished. His chest tightened. For months, she had lived with doubt, shame, the idea that maybe she really was broken, that her place in the army had evaporated in that burning vehicle. Hearing her commander finally acknowledge her sacrifice lit something fragile in her. "I was just doing my job, sir," she said quietly. "No," he shook his head sharply. You were doing far more than your job. You were being the kind of soldier the rest of us claim to be. And his voice faltered again. I tore you down in front of your formation because I wanted a target, an example, a soldier to make a point. He turned away, walked to the window, stared out at the training field below. Soldiers moved like ants, sharp, purposeful, but their movements seemed distant, insignificant compared to the weight in the room. I've served 26 years, he said, voice low. I thought I knew sacrifice. I thought I understood what leadership meant, but I've never had to make the choice you made, to risk everything, your body, your life, just to drag others home. He paused, shoulders stiff, head bowed. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. I mocked a hero, and I did it out of arrogance, out of ignorance, he clenched the windowsill, weakness. The word hit differently now, spoken by him, admitted by him. Exhaled slowly. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. For the first time since Kandahar, she felt the anger inside her shift. Not gone, not forgiven, but loosened. Sir, she said carefully, you couldn't have known. I should have known. He turned sharply, eyes wet, jaw tight. It's my job to know my soldiers, to understand their strengths, their limits, to build trust. I failed at every level of leadership. He returned to the desk, opened a fresh sheet of paper. His pen moved fast, decisive, strokes sharp enough to cut. I'm changing policy immediately, he said, writing as he spoke. Every soldier's full service record will be reviewed before modifications are questioned. Medical profiles will be treated with the respect they deserve, not dismissed as excuses. And he looked up at her. I want you to help me design something new. A wounded warrior support program. Right here. At Fort, soldiers like you need a way forward. Soldiers like you are the future of this army. Her throat tightened. She hadn't expected this. Purpose flickered again, fragile but real. Sir, that's not necessary. It's absolutely necessary, he cut her off. But his tone wasn't harsh anymore. It was resolute. And I want you to lead it. Who better to build a program for wounded warriors than one who refuses to let scars define her? The room was still. Her mind spun, transfer papers on her desk, discharge documents in her drawer, nights spent believing she had nothing left to give. And now this. A chance to turn pain into something useful. Her voice was soft when it came. I'd be honored, sir. He nodded once firmly. Relief flickered across his face like a man grasping at redemption. Then he opened another drawer, pulled out a small wooden box. There's something else. He slid it across the desk, opened it. Sergeant First Class stripes gleamed inside. His breath caught. The board approved your promotion last week, Harrison said. His voice was steady, but his shame was still evident. I held it back because I wanted to evaluate you myself. I wanted to see if you were fit. He paused, his hand curled into a fist. I was wrong. For the first time, silence didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like a recognition, a bridge. Stared at the stripes. They weren't just fabric, they were years of sweat. Blood, fire, survival, every scar on her body stitched into those threads. Sir, she whispered, I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept, say you'll stay, say you'll help me fix what I broke. She thought of her drawer, her papers, the choice she almost made last night, civilian life, escape, silence. And then she thought of Martinez, Johnson, Williams, the ones she had carried, the ones she had saved, the ones she couldn't. Her voice steadied. I accept, sir, and I'll do everything I can to help build that kind of unit. Harrison stood, extended his hand. For a moment the room froze. Iron Mike, the man who had mocked her, now stood humbled before her. She reached out, gripped his hand firmly. Thank you, Sergeant First Class, he said, for your service, for your sacrifice, and for giving me a chance to be a better leader. As their hands parted, something shifted. A new weight settled between them. Not shame, not pity, something stronger. Hope. Why did the auditorium feel like a battlefield? 6 months had passed. 6 months since that morning on the PT field. 6 months since had unbuttoned her jacket and shattered the silence that had caged her for so long. Now she stood on a stage at Fort, under a banner that read, Warrior Resilience Training Program, Building Strength Through Adversity. The room was packed. Soldiers lined the aisles, filled every seat, crowded along the walls, some in uniform, some with crutches, some with visible scars, many with invisible ones. Their faces reflected something had once thought she'd never feel again: anticipation, respect, hope. She stepped to the podium, rolled up her sleeves deliberately, letting the scars breathe under the lights. She didn't hide anymore. Good morning, warriors. The response was thunderous, a chorus of that shook the walls. 6 months ago, those same soldiers had laughed when she fell from a rope. Today, their voices carried something else entirely. She gripped the podium, not because she needed support, but because the wood felt grounding, something solid to hold while she told the truth. 6 months ago, I stood on this base and was told I was weak. I was told I was a liability, that soldiers like me had no place in this army. The room went still. No coughs, no shuffling, only silence. And for a while, I believed it. Her voice softened, carried, wrapped itself around every corner of the auditorium. But I'm here to tell you what I've learned. Strength isn't about what your body can do. Strength is what your spirit refuses to quit. The screen behind her flickered. A photo appeared. Her squad in Kandahar before the IED. 5 young faces, grinning, sun on their helmets, youth in their eyes. Throat caught, but she kept steady. She pointed to each face. Corporal Martinez, he wanted to be a teacher. Specialist Johnson, saving money to buy his parents a house. Private Williams, planning to propose to his girlfriend. Sergeant, a 2-year-old daughter he never got to meet. The next slide hit like a gut punch. The burned-out vehicle, smoke, med helicopters, the chaos of war captured in still frames. Some soldiers in the audience shifted uncomfortably. Some swallowed hard. Others stared without blinking. When that IED went off, I had a choice, she said. Focus on my injuries or focus on getting my soldiers home. I chose them. The photos changed again. Hospital beds, X-rays of titanium plates and screws, surgical scars, a shoulder rebuilt by hands in gloves and masks. I spent months believing I was finished, that I was broken, that my service had ended on that road in Afghanistan, but I learned something important. My scars don't make me weak, they make me experienced. My limitations don't make me useless, they make me creative. My struggles don't disqualify me from leadership, they qualify me to understand what real leadership means. Applause started low, built, rose until the auditorium thundered. Soldiers clapped not just for her, but for themselves, for what her words uncovered in their own hearts. When it finally died down, she leaned closer to the mic. Every person in this room has limitations. Maybe they're physical, maybe mental, maybe emotional, maybe visible, maybe hidden, but they are there. Pretending they don't exist doesn't make us strong, it makes us dishonest. On the screen, sobering numbers appeared. Suicide rates, PTSD diagnoses, attrition from untreated injuries. Soldiers stiffened, eyes hardening. They knew these numbers weren't abstract. They were names, faces, friends. This program isn't about lowering standards, said voice steady. It's about redefining strength, about understanding that warriors adapt, that scars aren't shame, they're proof. Proof that you survived, proof that you still have more to give. She stepped back. The screen shifted again, this time to faces of soldiers who had already gone through the program. Staff Sergeant, she said, pointing to a smiling man in uniform. 3 deployments, PTSD. He came forward, got treatment. He's now one of our strongest leaders, guiding young soldiers through combat stress. Another photo. A young man with a prosthetic leg standing tall with his squad. Private lost his leg in Syria. refused retirement, adapted his training. He's now teaching others with amputations, and he's preparing for the Paralympics. The rolled on, dozens of faces, soldiers who had found a way to serve, scars and all, soldiers who had turned pain into strength. The auditorium erupted again, not just applause this time, shouts, the kind that come from deep in the chest, the kind that carry belief. Let the sound wash over her. For the first time since Kandahar, she felt something she had thought was gone forever: purpose. From the front row, she caught sight of him. Colonel Harrison, sitting not with arrogance, not with command presence, but with humility. His shoulders carried less iron, more weight. The weight of a man who had learned, who had been humbled, who now believed in what once he mocked. When the cheers finally subsided, he rose and joined her on stage. 6 months ago, Harrison began, his voice heavy but steady, I failed as a leader. I failed to see what real strength looks like. Sergeant First Class showed me, and she has transformed this base. Injury rates are down. Unit cohesion is up. Soldiers are not just stronger, they're more honest. Because of her. His voice cracked just slightly, because she showed us her scars. Felt her throat tighten, but she nodded her thanks. The soldiers rose to their feet. Applause roared, not for him, not for her, for what they had built together. As she stepped back to the podium for closing words, she paused, looked out at the sea of faces, soldiers young and old, some hardened by battle, some still green, all of them carrying burdens no one else could see. And she told them the truth she wished someone had told her months ago. The enemy isn't always overseas. Sometimes the enemy is in here, she tapped her chest. The voice that says you're not enough. The culture that mistakes vulnerability for weakness. But we're warriors, and warriors adapt. We don't quit, we don't break, we bend, we scar, we heal, and we rise. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just applause. It was a shift, a change, a promise. For the first time in a long time, didn't feel like an imposter. She didn't feel broken. She felt like a leader. Why was silence heavier than applause? The auditorium had emptied hours ago, but echoes still clung to skin. She could still feel the thunder of boots, the roar of voices, the weight of 200 soldiers standing for her. Yet now, alone in her office, the quiet pressed harder than the noise ever did. Her nameplate gleamed on the door, SFC Elena VSQEZ, a door she once doubted she'd ever deserve. Inside, her desk was cluttered not with medals or certificates, but with letters, handwritten notes, printed emails, crumpled sheets folded by nervous hands. Soldiers she'd never met had sent their words here, each one a confession whispered into paper. She picked one up. The ink was smudged, the handwriting jagged. Sergeant, I was on the edge of signing my discharge papers. I thought my nightmares made me weak. But after hearing your story, I asked for help. I'm still here because of you. Her chest tightened. She set the letter down, exhaled slowly, picked up another. My son is stationed here. He came home last night and told me about your scars. He said for the first time since his deployment, he feels like someone understands him. Thank you. One by one, she read. Letters about anxiety, about prosthetics, about marriages strained by invisible wounds, about soldiers too proud to admit they were breaking until they saw someone else stand unashamed in her scars. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. The ovations, the respect, the program, none of it erased the truth. Every letter was heavy, every story pressed on her. Because behind them was a single unspoken plea: don't fail us, don't fall, you carry us now. And in that weight, doubt stirred again. Her left shoulder throbbed, reminding her that her body was still fragile. She rubbed the joint absent-mindedly, fingertips brushing scars through her sleeve. The surgeries had rebuilt bone, but not trust. Not the trust she had in her own body before Kandahar. Her computer screen glowed with unanswered emails, requests from bases across the country, Pentagon interest, media inquiries. Everyone wanted a piece of her story. But she wasn't a story. She was just a soldier who still woke at 2 a.m. drenched in sweat, hearing explosions that weren't there. A soldier who still sometimes reached for a rifle she no longer carried in combat. A soldier who sometimes wondered if the only reason she was alive was so others could die in her place. The door creaked, a knock followed, soft, hesitant. "Come in," said straightening. Corporal Jackson stepped in, no longer just her squad member, now one of the program's instructors. She carried a file, but her eyes carried something else. Concern. "You didn't come to chow," Jackson said gently. "Wasn't hungry," forced a smile. "Paperwork feast instead." Jackson's lips pressed into a line. She set the file on the desk. "That's progress report. He's doing better. Night terrors are down. Squad morale is up." Nodded. "Good, that's good." But Jackson didn't move, didn't leave. She studied her like she had that first day outside the barracks. "You're carrying all of this alone," Jackson said softly. Looked down at the letters, the papers scattered like fallen leaves across her desk. "It's my job." "It's not," Jackson countered. "It's ours, all of us. You keep talking about resilience, about scars being proof, not shame. But you," she hesitated, her voice lowering, "you still carry yours like a punishment." The words landed sharper than Harrison's insults ever had. "Didn't answer, couldn't." Jackson leaned forward, her voice steady but warm. "You told us that scars are stories, that we survive them together. So don't you dare stand up there and tell us that, then sit in here alone pretending you don't need the same thing." For a moment just stared at her. The younger soldier, the one who had welcomed her with respect when no one else had, the one who had stood by her through humiliation, through silence, through transformation. She exhaled, long, shaky, then nodded. "You're right," whispered. "I don't know how to let go of it. Kandahar it still owns me some nights." Jackson's eyes softened. "Then let us help carry it. You've carried enough alone." Swallowed hard. No salute, no formal words, just the quiet truth of one soldier to another. Jackson finally smiled, the kind that carried weight and relief. "We've got your back, Sergeant First Class, always." When the door shut behind her, looked back at the letters. They no longer looked like burdens. They looked like proof. Proof she wasn't alone. Proof others had scars too, and they were willing to share them because she had shown hers first. She picked up her pen, began writing replies, slowly, carefully, each one personal, each one honest, not polished, not perfect, honest. Outside her window, evening PT echoed across the field. Cadence calls, boots striking pavement, soldiers running, shouting, laughing. The same sound she had once thought she'd never belong to again. And as the sun set over Fort, realized something she had never dared admit to herself before. Survival wasn't her legacy. Resilience was. Why did the Pentagon care about a sergeant from Fort? 6 months earlier had been a soldier mocked on a training field. Now she stood in an auditorium packed than any deployment briefing she'd ever seen. But this wasn't just soldiers anymore. Generals sat in the front row. Pentagon officials in tailored suits filled the aisles. Even a few reporters, notepad in hand, waited for her words. The Warrior Resilience Program had spread like wildfire. What began as one colonel's attempt at atonement had become something larger, something the Army itself could no longer ignore. At the podium, breath deep. The air felt thick, heavy, alive with expectation. She rolled her sleeves again, scars visible under fluorescent light. They had once been her shame. Now they were her authority. "Good morning, warriors," she began. The auditorium answered with thunder. Soldiers, standing, sitting, lining the walls, their voices echoing like artillery. She waited for silence. When it came, it was absolute. 8 months ago, I was standing in formation, being told I was weak, that my body made me a liability, that I didn't belong in uniform. She let the words hang, glancing at the generals. None flinched, but some shifted uncomfortably. And I believed it, she continued, softer now. I was ready to walk away. I had my discharge papers signed. I thought my scars ended my story, but I was wrong. My scars were only the beginning. The first slide appeared on the massive screen behind her. Kandahar, the convoy, the wreckage, the story that had once been hers alone now belonged to everyone who saw it. She told it again, not for herself this time, but for every soldier sitting in the shadows of their own silence. Every line delivered steady, measured, like fire spread carefully across dry ground. I survived, but survival isn't strength. Survival is just the start. What you do after you survive, that's what defines you. The slides shifted. Faces of soldiers who had entered the program. Men and women who had walked into her office broken and walked out standing, scars visible, eyes clearer. Staff Sergeant, 3 deployments, PTSD, now one of our best leaders. Private, amputation, now training other warriors and preparing for the Paralympics. Corporal, silent panic attacks, now teaching resilience courses to new recruits. Her voice grew stronger, pulling the audience with her. This is what real strength looks like, not perfection, not untouched bodies, but scars turned into proof, pain turned into fuel, weakness turned into something stronger. A general in the front row leaned forward. Didn't need to hear his words to know what he was thinking. This could change everything. Then she paused, looked directly into the crowd. The enemy isn't always across the ocean. Sometimes the enemy is right here, she tapped her temple, telling us we're not enough. Sometimes the enemy is our own silence, our own fear of being seen as broken. That enemy has claimed more soldiers than bullets ever will. The room went still. Soldiers knew, generals knew, Pentagon suits knew. The numbers, suicides, untreated trauma, hidden scars haunted every corner of the force. His voice dropped low, almost a whisper. But warriors adapt. We don't quit, we don't break, we bend, we scar, we heal, and we rise. Applause erupted, not polite, not professional, fierce. Roaring, generals stood, soldiers shouted. It wasn't just approval, it was release. Behind her, Colonel Harrison rose to the stage. Not Iron Mike anymore, just Harrison, a man carrying his own lessons. His voice cracked but held steady. Sergeant First Class has transformed Fort. Injury rates are down. Morale is up. Soldiers are stronger, more honest, more resilient. And it's because of her. Because she showed us that scars aren't shame, they're survival. The standing ovation doubled. Bowed her head, humbled but steady. Later in the quiet of her office, the weight returned. The applause faded, but the responsibility remained. She sat at her desk, surrounded by letters again. Soldiers from across the country now. Stories pouring in. Scars both visible and invisible demanding to be acknowledged. A knock came at the door, this time not Jackson. Harrison stepped in, shoulders less rigid than months ago. He held a thin folder. His eyes carried something unusual, respect without reservation. They're talking about expanding it, he said, voice low. Pentagon-wide, every base, every soldier. Blinked, the thought felt unreal. She'd barely survived her own storm. Now they wanted her to guide an entire army through theirs. That's too big, she whispered before she could stop herself. Harrison shook his head. It's not too big, it's necessary, and they're looking at you to lead it. Her chest tightened, doubt clawed back in. Her scars burned beneath her sleeves. She thought of sleepless nights, panic, pain. She thought of every failure, every humiliation. I'm not, she started. Yes, you are, Harrison cut her off. His voice wasn't harsh, it was certain. You're exactly the kind of leader we need. Not because you're perfect, because you're not, because you know what it costs, because you lived it. Stared at him. For a long time, neither spoke. The weight of the future pressed between them like another battlefield. Finally, she exhaled. Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. Then I'll do it, not for me, for them. Harrison nodded. Relief flickered across his face, pride too. As he left, looked out the window. Soldiers moved across the field, their cadence sharp, purposeful. She once thought she'd never belong to them again. Now she realized she wasn't just among them. She was leading them into something new. Her scars would never fade, but maybe that was the point. They weren't reminders of what she lost. They were proof of what she still had to give. Why did endings feel like beginnings? 6 months after the Pentagon visit, the auditorium at Fort looked different. Flags lined the walls, cameras perched on tripods. Soldiers packed every row, but now they weren't just from Fort. Marines in dress blues, in crisp uniforms. Navy chiefs with anchors on their collars. Leaders from every branch had come. At the podium stood Sergeant First Class, sleeves rolled up, scars visible, no hesitation in showing them, not anymore. Behind her, the banner read, Warrior Resilience Training Program, Army-wide implementation. She took a breath, looked out over the sea of faces, young, old, decorated, green, soldiers who carried burdens no one else could see. Good morning, warriors. The chorus came back, voices from every corner of the military, colliding into one thunderous reply. She smiled faintly, then leaned in. A year ago, I was ready to quit. My discharge papers were signed. My shoulder was broken. My spirit was worse. I thought my scars made me weak. I thought I didn't belong in uniform anymore. Her voice caught, but she didn't stop. But I learned something. Scars don't end a story. Scars begin one. On the screen behind her, a photograph appeared. Kandahar. The convoy. The wreckage. Soldiers stared in silence. I survived that blast, but survival alone isn't strength. Strength is what you do after you survive. Do you hide, or do you rise? She gestured to the screen. It shifted. Faces of soldiers who had gone through the program filled the projection. Jackson, dozens more, each with their own story. They rose, said simply. They turned weakness into strength, pain into fuel, fear into leadership, and now the Army rises with them. The audience stirred, heads nodded, some eyes wet. Her voice softened. I won't lie to you. I still wake up some nights hearing explosions that aren't there. I still touch this shoulder and wonder if it'll hold. I still look at my scars and remember the fire. She paused. But I don't hide them anymore, because they're not shame. They're proof, proof that I lived, proof that I carried soldiers through fire, proof that I still have more to give, and so do you. The silence that followed was absolute, not empty, full, heavy with meaning. Then she delivered the truth she had carried for too long. The enemy isn't just out there. Sometimes the enemy is in here. She tapped her chest, then her temple, telling you you're not enough. But you are, you always were. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to prove itself. Sometimes dignity just acts. For a long, fragile moment, the room didn't move. Then slowly, soldiers began to stand. One row, then another, then the entire auditorium, a standing ovation that shook the building. Harrison rose in the front row, pride visible in his face. Generals stood beside him. Pentagon officials followed. For the first time in her career, wasn't applauded as a hero of one battle. She was applauded as a leader of something bigger, a shift, a change, a movement. As she stepped down from the stage, soldiers surged forward, not to cheer, to share, to speak, to tell her their stories, their scars, their truths. Later in her office, she sat surrounded by photographs pinned to the bulletin board. Soldiers from across the country who had written her. Soldiers who had walked through fire of their own and refused to quit. Soldiers who now called themselves warriors not because they were unscarred, but because they bore scars without shame. Her purple heart sat beside her bronze star. For months she had hidden them in drawers. Now they sat in the open, not as relics but as reminders. Her phone buzzed. A text from Corporal Jackson, now Sergeant Jackson. Pentagon says they want this everywhere. You did it, SFC. You changed everything. Smiled, looked out her window at the training field. Soldiers moved across it, sharp, purposeful, their cadence calls echoing into dusk. The same field where she had once been mocked, the same dirt where she had once fallen, the same place where she had once stood alone, jacket open, scars revealed. She touched her shoulder absent-mindedly. The ache was still there, it always would be, but it no longer felt like punishment, it felt like proof. Her scars would never fade. But maybe they weren't supposed to. Because scars weren't weakness. Scars were strength written in flesh. And sometimes strength doesn't shout. Sometimes it simply stands,